Hello and welcome to the Spread for the World podcast on online training and online events. My name is Stefan, and today we speak about aspects to keep in mind during an actual event. So this podcast is about the actual execution of our online event, of our online training. As I already mentioned in a previous podcast, preparation is really the be-all and end-all of an online conference, as well as of an online training. Now it's all about making sure everything works during the event. The preliminary information have hopefully been sent out, and there are a few things we have to take in mind before the participants are trickling in. Mainly, it makes a lot of sense to have a technology check in advance for ourselves. So to reduce the potential for glitches or problems, thoroughly test your tools and equipment before the workshop. In doing so, make sure you can be clearly seen and heard before going online. Make sure there are no network or power issues when conducting the conference. So I always connect my laptop to a power supply. You easily run out of battery. I also try to connect to a LAN cable if that's possible. Check your microphone beforehand and your image settings of your camera. Then you hopefully have your agenda next to you, where you have made some notes about what, obviously the order of the topics, but also what software to use or what other tools you want to use, how much time you have for each topic, etc. So now you're online, your conference participants start trickling in. Hopefully you have invited them a little bit earlier to the actual start of the conference so that they too can check their technical situation, so that they also can be heard and seen clearly. During online conferences, clarity of every stage is really important. The potential for misunderstanding in online workshops is so much higher than in offline workshops. Things can be missed and participants don't have as much opportunity to ask questions on the sidelines of the main discussion. Therefore, be as simple and clear as possible, for example when briefing activities or exercises, and invite participants to ask questions before you actually start a specific activity. Write guiding questions for specific group phases in the chat, so the participants who cannot hear properly also can see it, and to avoid misunderstandings really. And keep in mind also in online events, everyone wants to be included. Make sure everyone is heard. It's your job as facilitator to let others take the stage. Sometimes it helps to have a list of everyone's names next to you, and sometimes I even put the name list in the chat so everybody knows who's online as well. And when we, for example, take a round of feedback on a specific topic, they know in which order they will be asked. Such a list helps especially those participants who are not so fast with mute and unmute of the microphone, because now they know when it's their turn. Another aspect is try to look into the camera. I know this is not always easy, and I tend to forget about it as well. But like myself, quite often many moderators look at the screen during online conferences to read notes or to the other participants on the screen. This makes them automatically look a little bit below the camera if the camera is mounted on top of the screen. At the same time, we are so much used to look at each other's eyes or really to look at each other. That doesn't mean that you should stare into the lens. That doesn't really help. But just remember to keep looking directly into the camera as often as possible. In the beginning, and I still do that quite often, it can also be helpful to place a picture of a head or a post-it with a smiley right around the lens. None of the participants will see it, and it helps, at least me, a bit to keep looking into the camera. So I look at the smiley, and it's more obvious in the little lens of my webcam. If you want to use a screen and the camera at the same time, which is quite normal, it also might be an option to put your camera on a tripod right in front of the screen. It gets a little bit in the way, but it makes you automatically look at the camera much more often. Basically, like in offline events, also in online events, direct interaction with the participants of the event, conference, or meeting is really important. Conferences, in particular, often feel like digitized frontal teaching, where one person speaks and everyone else listens. This is boring. This can be made, you can distribute this sort of information through professional movies. A video call is really about communicating with each other, exchanging ideas, and using the collective intelligence of those present. That's why I recommend addressing participants directly. This can happen by making a small round, as mentioned before, in which everyone gets a chance to speak, or by addressing them specifically through the moderator, by naming them, such as, what do you think about this, Joshua? Or, do you agree on this aspect, Adenike? If I address people directly, they feel much more integrated, and they don't have another chance then to respond to the question. It's a totally different story than when I come with open questions, or who else would like to comment on this point? Obviously, this also makes sense, but usually the same people tend to answer, and others are more quiet. So, in concrete terms, if you have a chance, or think about to, at least once in a while, address people in the online conference directly and by their names. Perhaps you have also seen that individual participants have reacted to a contribution with their facial expressions, smiling, frowning, nodding, shaking their hands. Use this as a concrete reason to address people directly. With Florence, I saw a shake of the head. Can you say something more about that, Florence? Why were you nodding, Paul? Can you elaborate on that? This is why people feel directly addressed and involved in the online conference. Well, obviously, there are also a lot of tools you can use, software tools. But keep in mind that every tool takes time to learn. Choosing tools that are similar to ones your participants are already familiar with or have used can help everyone to get on board quickly. Especially if you work with people who are not so experienced in online conferences, try to use as few extra tools as possible. Using overly complex tools for simple tasks can lead to frustration and wasted time in the workshop. You always have to consider if this is the first time, if participants work the first time with a specific software, it might take a lot of extra time for them to really get used to that. And is it worth the effort? But as a general rule of thumb, process first, tool second. All tools are only as effective as the process they support and the facilitator who uses them. And remember that everything you do in a workshop should support the group and the goals of the workshop, and the tools you choose should not get in the way. Well, nevertheless, there are a few tools I really like using. Well, first of all, I use a lot breakout rooms. They are often included in the conference software. For example, they're included in Zoom, in WebEx, or Big Blue Button. It takes a little bit of experience to organize them as a moderator, but it's not rocket science, it's not so difficult. But it creates a smaller group, or with these breakout rooms you can create small group discussions, and that's really quite nice for the participants. Then I like to use polls, opinion polls. Engagement tools you can use here are Mentimeter, Storms, Slido, and they can be great for increasing engagement through a polls in a meeting. Then there are surveys. At some point you likely want to solicit feedback from your attendees. And this can be done before or after a workshop and can be invaluable for both ensuring the usefulness of your session and improving your process later on. Typeform, for example, is a great tool that makes beautiful forms, but it's very expensive. SurveyMonkey is a good alternative, and however, there are other free versions such as Google Forms. That's a free option that your participants are probably already familiar with. But always keep in mind that free is not necessarily free. They also have to make money, yeah? And for example, Google makes its money by selling user data. So think carefully about what information you entrust to free tools. Then there are certain methods for brainstorming. What I like to use are whiteboard software tools. Miro or Mural in the free version are quite good already. Padlet is another nice tool to use. Again, there is a good tool from Google. It's called Jamboard, with the security limitations already mentioned. But one positive aspect from Google, with all their market power, they really have developed great and very simple to use tools. Generally speaking, if you use a whiteboard, whatever whiteboard you choose, visualization is also important on online events. Some people really forget about that they have prepared their PowerPoint presentation, that's about it. Try to visualize processes if possible. Beside the tools mentioned, like Padlet, Miro, etc., I like to use an Etherpad. Etherpad is basically an online collaboration Word document where each and everybody with the right access data can write in at the same time. At the end of the session, there should be a feedback round. As in face-to-face events, you also should ask for feedback at the end of an online event. This can be done if you're in a smaller group, for example, by a final round. You know, the way I mentioned before, post a list of all names in the chat and everyone knows when it's their turn. Or you can ask the participants to write their feedback directly in the chat. That's also quite nice. The advantage here is that you can easily copy out the feedback at the end and everyone can work at the same time. You don't have to go like one by one. Then you can maybe pick out a few aspects from the chat and elaborate a little bit more on them. And then you probably have a final goodbye, like everybody's waving into the camera and you switch off. You finalize the actual meeting. Well, exercise for today would be create your own meeting plan. Include what do you want to talk about at what point, which tools do you want to use. Now the event is over. And what happens after the workshop? Well, actually, my personal perspective on that, what happens after the workshop is as important as what it is happening during the workshop. Any solution or idea that a group developed can only work if it's successfully communicated and implemented. So share the results and discussion topics with participants after the workshop. With online workshops, this is actually quite easy because you can collect survey results, take screenshots, or share feedback from the group whiteboard. You can even record the session so people who couldn't make it can watch later. This can help continue important conversations, provide additional insights that may not have been shared during the workshop, and allow people who were unable to attend to contribute even after the workshop. Without this interaction after the workshop, insights from the workshop might go unnoticed and results may be lost. So a follow-up checklist is really key. Send minutes, results and to-do lists to everyone. Maybe you include a link to a data repository like a cloud, or think about security aspects, where all used documents, presentations, etc. are stored. But yeah, really pay attention to data protection. Do not store sensitive data in commercial clouds. And also in more like Nextcloud or other more private clouds, be sensitive about the information you share online. So send out lists of participants only if necessary. Possibly get feedback again. And what I really like, include a short thank you letter to all participants. So I hope I could give you some ideas on what to take care when you're actually executing an online event. My name is Stefan Emrich, and you were listening to a Bread for the World podcast. And now, keep on practicing.